am April Henry. I am the Executive Director for Highway City Community Development. We are the entire west of Fresno area of 55,000 residents. And we work in both, we have a community resource center where we see over 20,000 people come through the doors on an annual basis. But we also work in housing advocacy and development, community empowerment and engagement, community development and infrastructure. Next year, we will be working on a very large grant for the West of 99 area that includes, it's part of the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project, working on sidewalks, bike lanes, hawk safety systems. So hopefully we have safe passageways, but we also have a vast need for additional safe ingress and egress out of our community. Right now, everybody, I think about safety measures, and that is a large issue for our community.
Amazing work. Thank you, April. Glad you're here. Carol Ann.
Hi, I'm Carol Ann Mimi. I'm with the League of Women Voters, and I'm co-chair of the Climate Action Committee.
Great. Welcome. Dennis. Oh, and you're on mute, I think.
Hi, everyone. Dennis Ball with the Fresno Cycling Club, president, and here representing 600 members of the Fresno Cycling Club.
Fantastic.
For better infrastructure for safety.
Great, great. Logan, I think you were the one that alerted us to the cameras being off. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Logan Robertson Hecker, Executive Director, Sequoia Riverlands Trust. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. Kay?
I'm Kay Burtkin, one of the co-presidents of the League of Women Voters in Fresno, and we've been working on transportation issues.
Great. And Tony?
Hi, I'm Tony Molina. I'm the past chair of the Fresno County Bicycle Coalition.
Great. And Paul?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Paul Marquez. I'm a private citizen, but also a member of the City of Fresno's Active Transportation Advisory Committee.
Fantastic. Adam?
My name is Adam Livingston. I'm Director of Planning and Policy at Sequoia Riverlands Trust and also Environmental Conservation Representative on the Fresno RTP Roundtable.
Excellent. Sharon?
Hi there. My name is Sharon Weaver. I'm the Executive Director of the San Joaquin River Parkway and Conservation Trust.
Welcome. Welcome. Christine?
Hi, I'm Christine Hadid, the Associate Organizer for the Central Valley IAF. We're a broad-based organization made up of community-based member institutions, and climate justice is a big concern for our members.
Great. So glad to have you here. Taylor?
Hi, I'm Taylor Poisel representing the American Red Cross, and we know the climate crisis impacts our disaster relief and emergencies, and so we're here to learn and see how we can play a role in that as more disasters happen every year in our valley.
Vanessa?
Hi, my name is Vanessa Dunong-Devon. I'm a project manager at Self-Help Enterprises. We do affordable housing development.
And Rhonda?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Dewick. I'm the Executive Director of the Jackson Community Development Corporation. Glad to be on.
Welcome. Mona?
Hi, my name is Mona Nandero Cummings, and I'm the CEO of Tree Fresno, a 40-year-old urban tree planting nonprofit based here in Fresno, but serving the central San Joaquin Valley. We've planted over 53,000 trees. So that's what we do. Thank you.
Phenomenal. Glad to have you here. Carson?
Hi, Carson with Self-Help Enterprises. I'm here on behalf of Tammy with the Emergency Services team, and I am the manager over disasters in CN Prep, and we are also a Listos California awardee statewide.
Great. Keel?
It's Kyle Lopez Schmidt. I'm the executive director of the South Tower Community Land Trust. We're south part of the Tower District, definitely impacted by some past transportation projects like the 180 freeway that kind of had some negative impacts on us in the Belmont corridor. And we own two properties that are adjacent to the 180 and the California high-speed rail corridor. So hoping to build a kind of repair some of the past harm and build transit-oriented developments.
Great. Kelly.
Hi there, I'm Kelly Kaczarski. I'm with the Sierra Resource Conservation District, and we protect land, water resources. Thank you.
Great, welcome. Juana, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
¿Sí me escuchan?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Ya, lo siento, no creo que hay interpretación. Conozco a Sheila, hablo español, mi nombre es Juana Iris Mesa, trabajo para Familias en Acción y y pues nada, estoy aquí para aprender. Lo siento, no, no sé si alguien entendió esto.
I understand you, Juana. Juana's from Familias in Action. Thanks for being here. Gracias por estar aquí.
Gracias.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. Welcome, Juana. Nora.
Hi, my name's Nora Chandara, and I'm with Fresno Metro Ministry. And I'm here because actually invited from Sheila. So hi, Sheila and everyone else. And Metro, we have a Fresno Food Security Network, which is our Food Policy Council group. And one of our priorities is land use and transportation. So I'm here to learn more.
Great.
Thank you.
And Natalie, I see your hand up. You want to introduce yourself as well?
Oh, hi. Yeah, Natalie with Central California Environmental Justice Network. I'm a policy associate. I did just want to translate the other part of what Lilia just said. She did ask if there was any interpretation, just because she was also here to learn.
Great question. Maggie is on the line with us, and she was able to interpret part of the conversation. Maybe what we can do is make sure to connect the two of them and make a plan for how we can be exchanging information as much as we can in real time in this conversation, and then after today's call as well. Maggie, how does that sound to you?
Yeah, we were just, our team was just thinking on the fly how to manage this, but in full transparency, but we do want you to stay on the line. We want, queremos que Juana participe también. What we can do is I think the presentation will be in English, but when we prompt participation, we can both prompt the question in Spanish, and then we can translate together to get, so we don't miss anything because it can be hard. But together translate back any participation from our Spanish speakers, if that sounds okay. Y puedo traducir rápidamente. Lo que dije en español es que para aquellos que hablan español vamos a presentar toda la información en inglés, pero cuando hacemos preguntas a la audiencia, podemos hacerlos en español, y cuando ustedes tengan respuestas o algo que quieren decir, podemos traducir eso entre nosotros que hablemos los dos idiomas. Entonces, por favor, quédense y vamos a encontrar una forma de hacerlo. Gracias.
Gracias, Maggie.
Thank you. Tammy, I see your hand up.
Hi, yeah, I am Tammy with with Self Help Enterprises. I'm the director of emergency services. I don't think you guys can see me, which is really weird. Or can you see me now?
No, we're not able to.
Okay. Oh, it says I just got something that says join as a panelist or as an attendee. What should I click?
Yeah, go ahead and click that link for panelists.
and we should be able to see you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
I'm back now. Sorry.
There you are.
Hi.
Good to see you. Thanks for rolling with the technical glitches.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
I feel like we have a few more folks to introduce. Could you kindly raise your hand if you have not had the chance to introduce yourself yet? Okay, great. Let's go to Terry.
Representing the League of Women Voters of Fresno. There are about 150 members of the league, and as part of our social actions, we've always been involved in following the climate issue, as well as how transportation affects that.
Great, welcome. And then did I see Felipe? There you
Hola a
are.
todos. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Felipe Perez. I work with the Socio-Environmental Education Network. Also, I'm a council member from Faribault, mayor, former mayor, and I'm with different organizations and Faribault as a rural community. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. So we have some good questions coming up in the Q&A, and just want to make sure that we have someone moderating and answering those questions as we roll forward. Maggie, do you know who's on point for that?
We can
I
have
am.
Sheila, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that. I have a question. Susie Panel is asking if we have translation services. We don't, but I see Susie has I wanted to know if the question is that she needs translation.
She's saying that the translation isn't working.
Good afternoon. I'm Susie Pinal, and I'm not need the translation. I'm not speaking on behalf of my friend who speaks Spanish, and unfortunately, they want to leave because will be a conflict to understand what you're saying in your presentation because it's totally in English. We was not aware that it's only in English, and I mean, we tried to use the CC, the caption, but it's not working. I don't know if someone can make a solution because they click the Spanish, but it's still the caption is still appear in English. And
yeah, we don't have that enabled, the interpretation services enabled. We are it's only the presentation will be in English today because we weren't aware, apologies, but we weren't aware that there were going to be Spanish speakers on the call, and I had requested in advance that we know. But what we're going to do is what we said earlier, that we'll do the translation around the participation. If you'd like to stay, we would love for you to stay on the call. Is that clear?
But it's clear for me, but I will notify Ari Padilla, who is the one who sent the invitation to us, and to, because we have a Fresno who is multicultural, and there's too many languages. Thank you.
Yeah. Susie, I really apologize for the shortcoming on this one. We had at the body of the email requested that to let us know if translation is needed, because this was a CBO workshop, and we didn't hear back from anybody. Brooke, do we want to maybe offer another focus meeting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And so
Can we do that? Yeah.
Yep. So I would say that for anyone that doesn't feel like they can participate in English today, let's make sure we get their contact information, keep rolling forward with today's meeting, and then let's have a more individual session in Spanish so that we can make sure that we're getting that information and exchanging ideas. Okay, great. Thank you all. So let's go ahead and pull up the slides. And we're going to give you just a brief introduction to the project. We also have a couple of housekeeping things I just wanted to mention. So if you're able to keep your cameras on for as much of the meeting today as possible, that's great. It's just really helpful to put a face with a name. Second of all, if you would like to ask a question, make a comment in any way at any point, please just raise your hand and we'll absolutely take pause and make that happen. There's also the Q&A function as well. So we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to kind of pause and ask questions as needed. So Maggie, can you go ahead and pull up the slides?
Sure.
Great. Okay, so we're going to spend about 15 minutes now just giving you an overview of the project and what we're working on. Fantastic. Okay. Paul, do you want to share some of the objectives from the COGS perspective? I'm also happy to talk through these.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody again for your participation. At a very high level, Fresno COG understands that there is an ongoing climate crisis that's facing our county, and that we feel like this plan can help address on the transportation infrastructure side, putting together strategies and policies and projects in order to adopt those into our 2026 regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy, in order for them to be implemented in the future. And so through this project, we want to advance a set of implementable projects that demonstrably reduce risk to the transportation network and its users. And I just want to again thank everybody through this process. We'd like to gather feedback and input as we develop all these key objectives. And so I'll hand it back over to Brooke to kind of walk us through the plan schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paul. I'm going to just walk through the technical elements of the work plan that we're delivering over the course of a year. So the first is really the plans and policy review, and this is work that we completed over the summer. It's really compiling a foundation of the relevant policy and technical information that is informing the climate risk assessment. And then the climate risk assessment, this is really the meat of the technical work that Karen will be providing an overview in just a moment, and we'll be doing a deeper dive on. Coming out of that work this winter, we'll be identifying a list of projects and policies and programs that will best address what we're seeing as risks to your transportation network across Fresno County. And advancing a handful of those projects for the COG to get more detailed recommendations around. And then developing the resiliency plan. So as you can see from our schedule, we're about halfway through the process. This is our first meeting with you all today. We're hoping to reconvene this group around March of next year, where we'll be presenting the draft list of projects and priority projects and plan for you and your input as well. But we also have a whole phase of public outreach for the community to engage in this project as well. So we're looking to wrap up the project in around June of 2025. Okay, so just in terms of, oh, Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a quick question. Is there already a climate resiliency plan? Is this an update or is this a new plan?
This is a new plan specifically for Fresno County's transportation system. So we're really looking just at transportation infrastructure. And I know that this does build on other kind of climate resiliency plans that are happening with the city in Fresno and elsewhere.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the community engagement activities that are happening. So in October, the COG launched an online survey, and it's still open now. Sheila hopefully shared that link via email to you all, and we'll also reshare it later in the meeting. Happening today is our virtual workshop with all of you. And then once we're in the new year, we're going to be hosting a series of 5 pop-up events really focused on the priority projects that we'll be identifying, and would love your partnership in helping us identify where to locate those pop-ups and how we can make them most successful in terms of engaging with communities. And yes, Spanish translation will be a part of that. And then in March, we'll be inviting the general public to review the draft plan and provide comments on it. So as mentioned at the end of today's meeting, we'll be soliciting your ideas on how to really spread the word further and engage more people in this process. And I'll just say, if you have some ideas, but you need to jump off the call sooner, please reach out to Sheila via email, and we'll reshare her email address as well if you don't have it, because we want to make sure that we have as many touch points as we possibly can. And then lastly, next slide, please. In parallel with this group, we have a technical working group with representatives from all of the agencies listed here. And we've had the opportunity to meet with them twice so far to really solicit their ideas and direction on the technical elements of the project. They have been fantastic, and we'll be meeting with them 2 more times before we wrap up the project. And actually, our next meeting with this group will be in tandem with them. So we'll be looking to merge both the community voice as well as the public agency ones. So stay tuned for that. Okay, I'm going to pause there and turn it over to Karen, who's going to walk us through what we've been doing on this climate risk assessment so far.
Great, thank you, Brooke. So hi, everybody. My name is Karen Barnes. I am the project manager for the consultant team. And so I'm going to give you an overview of the work the team has done as part of the climate risk assessment before we switch over into the more interactive portion of the meeting. We go to the next slide. Our project, as Bruce mentioned, is focused on transportation infrastructure. And within the study, we're looking at these assets that you can see. So roads and bridges, the transit network, bus yards, the bike network, and airports. In the interest of time today, we're really going to be focusing on the road network, the transit network, and the bike network, as we think these are kind of the more relevant and interesting pieces of the work. If we move on to the next slide. So in terms of climate hazards, we are considering flood, wildfire, extreme heat, and landslide. We're looking at them both in terms of how they happen today, as well as how they're projected to change into the future due to climate change. And today we'll be focusing on flood, wildfire, and extreme heat. First, I just want to give you a really kind of brief background on our approach. The goal of the risk assessment is to understand how climate hazards may impact the transportation infrastructure in Fresno County, so that we can prioritize where projects and efforts should be focused to make the infrastructure more resilient. The way that we do that is by looking at 3 main things. The first one is hazard, and so that's the floods, the wildfires. How often do they occur, and how severe are they? The second piece is exposure, and that's what we're talking about, the infrastructure itself. Where is it located, and what do we know about these different pieces of infrastructure? And then the third component is vulnerability, and that's how do we expect the infrastructure to perform when subjected to a hazard? How damaged will it be? How long will it take to recover? Things like that. And then when we combine these 3 components together, we get an understanding of risk. So then when we get into the results in a minute, you will see that some of the parts of the road network will be labeled as high risk versus low risk. And this is really the table that sits behind all of these ratings. So on the left-hand side, we have categories for how likely, for example, a flood might be. And then you combine that with how impactful that flood could be, which you can see along the top, to get to a risk rating. So as an example, a flood that is really unlikely to happen, that causes only temporary impacts, so maybe something on the order of hours, would be assigned a very low risk rating that you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. And so this allows us to compare floods with wildfires, for example, when we know that some of these events might happen more often than others. If we go to the next slide. So equity is a very important consideration in this project, and the overall list of recommendations will be considered through this lens. If we go to the next slide, we will be using Fresno COG's definition for equity priority communities, which is shown here in orange on the map, as well as the definition for disadvantaged communities from SB 535, which is shown in the pink areas. As all of you are, I'm sure, well aware, much of Western Fresno County falls into one or both of these designations. And then much of Fresno, the Fresno Clovis metro area falls within the equity priority community designation as well. In case you're not familiar with the factors that go into these two designations, you can see them here. So the equity priority communities designation considers the percentage of population of people of color or minorities, low-income households, the percentage of limited English speakers, and housing cost burdens, while the disadvantaged communities category is based on state and federal socioeconomic and pollution burden data. Okay, so before we dive into the interactive portion of the meeting and share the findings in more detail, I wanted to give you a quick sneak peek at our overall key findings from the study. So if we start from the top here, looking at flood, of the three climate hazards, flooding has the greatest impact on the county's transportation assets. Fresno City, Clovis, and Western Fresno County face the highest risk of flooding, and we know that rainfall is projected to increase into the future, and so this will increase the risk of flooding across the county. Moving on to wildfire, this primarily impacts rural and mountainous areas, as you might expect. And in the future, a drier and hotter climate is projected to increase the number of wildfires that occur. And then lastly, for heat, as you all know, it's already an issue that you're dealing with every year. It has the largest impact in terms of the transportation assets to transit riders, pedestrians, and bicyclists, and it's projected to increase into the future with climate change. So there are some of the key findings that we have found from this study, which we'll dive into shortly. And then lastly from me, we shared this information with our technical working group right before Thanksgiving, and we wanted to share some of the key points that came out of that discussion with you all. So you can see them here. There was discussion about communities that may become isolated if the main routes in and out are impacted. And of course, we're talking about the rural areas here. We talked about how this can impact emergency response and that coordination with first responders is really important. And we also heard about the importance of not only considering how many people a project might serve, as this would likely disadvantage rural communities. We also heard that there are existing issues with degraded pavement across the county, and that in terms of transit, providing shade at transit stops is something that has come up a lot in the past. Again, related to transit, we heard that bus yards are really critical facilities to prioritize investment for transit, and that lastly, there are opportunities to streamline permitting for proposed projects that will help to reduce costs and accelerate implementation. So hopefully some of this resonates with you, and we can talk more about that in a minute. But I just wanted to share with you all some of the things that we've been hearing throughout the course of the project. So in a minute, we'll have an opportunity to deep dive into these findings, and we'd love to hear from you. But I wanted to pause here for a minute and see if there are any questions about the scope of the project or what we've shared so far. Hi, Kyle. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to just uplift that I'm surprised that air quality isn't one of the climate risks. It's for us locally, while wildfire isn't a direct risk, it's kind of impacts our air quality, and a lot of the increase in heat changes the chemistry of the air and what we're breathing. And so I think that's an important aspect that should be studied along with this, especially as you're coming up with transit solutions that might still increase the risk for people that are having to breathe the air as they navigate our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That isn't currently included in the scope, but that is, yeah, definitely an important one by the sounds of it that we can look into. Tony.
Yeah, just tag on to Kyle's remarks. I was thinking along the same lines, particularly exposed outdoor workers like farm workers and things that, with the wildfire exposure, and also speaking from the point of view of cyclists having to breathe polluted air. That's certainly particularly for vulnerable segments of the bike riding population, including like seniors and children. That's certainly in addition to the heat part of it, certainly is a hazard that I would want to reference there. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Maggie.
Solo quisiera decirlo en español que estamos hablando ahora acerca de las reacciones que tenemos acerca de la presentación que hemos visto hasta ahora en cuanto a los resultados del proyecto. Y lo que han mencionado hasta ahora es la importancia de la calidad de aire en cuanto a sus impactos en el público y también las condiciones para los trabajadores. Karen, back to you.
Thanks, Maggie.
Y si quisieran hacer una pregunta en español, todavía está bienvenido. Podemos programar otra fecha para discutirlo con más detalle en español.
Okay. Tony, I see your hand is still up. I don't know if you have another question. If you do.
Sorry, let me take it down. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So we can move on then to the next slide and next portion. So this is where we transition over to the more fun part of the meeting, where we'll share the findings in more detail and be asking for your input. So yesterday, Sheila did send across an email with a link to the Miro board, and then you can see the information up here on the screen as well. So if you're able to join us directly in the Miro, that would be fantastic. We'll be working in tandem, and we'll introduce you to how it works if you're not familiar with it already. So we just ask that you navigate to this website, which is https :/bit.ly -FCCRP. If you get the pop-up, click cancel. Otherwise, it'll send you to a login screen, which is not where we want you to go. And then you'll need to enter the password, which is Fresno County, all lowercase and one word. And then to click on the arrow. So that should hopefully get you in there. If you're not able to get in for any reason, no problem. We will be sharing a screen, and feel free to voice your input, and we'll be capturing that live. So yeah, no worries if you aren't able to get in. We'll be able to make it work. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Gino, and she can take us through the mirroring.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. And yeah, I'm really excited to walk through this interactive presentation exercise with everyone. I do think that I need whoever's sharing slides to stop sharing so that I'm able to screen share my screen. And then as I'm doing that, please feel free to speak up if you're having any trouble with getting in. However, you'll be able to see in a second that I will walk you through each portion of the exercise on my screen. So if you're able to follow along, that is great too, and you'll be able to participate that way. All right.
Janelle, can I ask something? Should we
Sure.
have that slide back on one more time? And if Maggie can talk about the instructions in Spanish?
Oh, sure.
Sure.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thanks.
And just to give everybody more time to get into the board, it can take a minute anyway. Ahora estamos yendo a otra página web que se llama Miro, donde vamos a hacer unas actividades juntos. Hay una opción de solamente observar Gino, la que está presentando, va a compartir su pantalla, pero si tienes otra pantalla, también puedes navegar a este link que está en el chat o en las preguntas. Am, y una vez que estás ahí, vas a ver algunas opciones. Si llega a esta ventana que dice abre Miro, puedes poner cancelar. Y luego vas a poner el password aquí. La clave es Fresno County y luego hacer clic en la flecha. Y eso te haría llegar a la pantalla.
Right. Brenda, just a question for you. Are you able to drop any of this into the chat or the Q&A for folks to click on?
I was just sharing with Paul that I can't type anything into the Q&A. I can't ask a question from here, and otherwise I was gonna drop it in the Q&A just so people could pull it and click on it from there.
Okay. Well, we will be demoing it, so let's just roll with it. Thank you.
All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I already see a number of people coming into the Miro, which is fantastic. And okay, please let me know if you are having any trouble with seeing what I'm seeing on my screen. But so this is the Miro, and as you can see, there are a few panels of exercises that we want to get through in the next hour, hour and a half. I wanted to start before we jump into the fun part, as Karen said, with a little bit of an orientation, just thematically, what we'll be talking about today, and then as well as some practice and practical Miro tips and organization. Today, we're talking through a few different infrastructure assets that Brooke and Karen briefly touched on, the roads and bridges, the transit network, and the bike network. We are looking primarily at three hazards and their impacts and their shifts in climate in the future on these assets. So that's flooding, wildfire, like burning wildfire, and extreme heat. And noted about, the smoke impacts and the air quality impacts. What we'll do is we'll walk through a discussion of some of the analysis and the assessment that we've done with respect to each combination of these assets and these hazards, but we'll also have the opportunity for y'all to share and talk about your experience with these hazards and these assets in Fresno County. And it'll be really interactive, and you'll be able to place sticky notes and things on the map. So, please do share your experiences with anything related to these hazards when we get into each of the sections. We're going to orient around the hazards themselves. So as you saw in the panes that I spoke through earlier, we'll start with flood, we'll move to wildfire, and we'll finish up with extreme heat. And at the very end, we'll have a little bit of a wrap up to tie everything together.
Janelle, can I add one more note here? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So everyone, if you are not able to get into the Miro or add notes, you can raise your hand and tell us what you want to add to the Miro board, and we can type it on a sticky note in the Miro. So please don't hesitate to raise your hand and let us know if you have any questions or comments that you cannot add to the Miro. Otherwise, it's all yours and you can interact with it. Thank you.
Yes. And I've seen someone is already interacting with it. This post-it note is not mine, but I'm glad that people are feeling comfortable. So yeah, please feel free to comment, sticky note. I'm sure a lot of people are already feeling, comfortable with this. That's great. But I do want to make sure that we go through orientation for anyone who's new to Miro or maybe hasn't used Miro as much before. The last thing that I just wanted to touch on before I get into some of the Miro stuff is that this map itself of Fresno County. And so this map, you'll see us, you'll see many times with many different data sets overlaid, some of the results of our assessments overlaid. What we have done for the map, for this map and the maps that you'll be adding to or interacting with in some of the exercises later, is noted a few key features that you'll see once you start to zoom in. And there's certain roads and certain areas and certain rivers and lakes that we just wanted to leave there for orientation. And yeah, feel free to drop in your own if you see anything missing, but it's really more just to orient certain sections of the map when we are talking about our specific results or when you're putting your own input onto the map. And I'll zoom back out, but you can always zoom in if you are looking at Miro on your own computers and see these in greater detail. The last part of this orientation is practice exercise. I see that a number of people have already been doing the practice exercise, so this is exactly what we'd love for you to do. And in anticipation of this, though, I'll show in a second, I do want to go to this sort of reference panel that I have here, and you can look at it at any point in time, but it's giving little tips and tricks to engaging with the Miro, and I'll just go through it very briefly, but if you're ever feeling stuck, you can always come back and look. But there's a couple ways. So, everyone's coming in as an editor. You can edit the board. I've locked down a few frames. We don't move them around, but you can always take sticky notes. You can write comments. You can add anything you want. And so that happens, if I'm going like this. If I'm going to grab a sticky note, I can always grab it and put it somewhere. I'm also able to move around the board. So this, if I just move my mouse, I'm moving, but if I hold my tracking wheel down, it'll come into a hand and I can move around the board. You can also hold the space bar, press the control key, and that'll allow you to zoom in and out and move around as well. Pluses and minuses work as well for zooming, so it's rather flexible. One thing, if you would like, you can follow me on the board. My name is Jeanal, and my icon is little J, and you can click on it, and that way you'll just follow me around the board wherever I go. But you can always click anywhere on the board to stop following me, and then look at it on your own time and on your own screens.
Janelle, can you show them where to find your icon on that bar? Can you pull it down so they see it?
Yeah. So here's where you can see all the people in the board. My name is Jeanal Mehta, so you should be able to find mine, and you can look at any of the people who are coming in here and click on my name. And
I'm sorry, could you post the link?
Yeah,
to get there?
I'm not able to post in the Q&A itself as a panelist, but if someone
Yeah,
Let's
it's
type it
actually in
Miro
there.
word. Yeah.
It's under the, it has to be his. Can you ask a question actually, and then to post the link, and
Yes.
then we'll reply. It's kind of convoluted that way. Here we go. Great. There we go. Thank you, Nora. And then I'm gonna put the password right next to it, which is Fresno County altogether.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Maggie. And thanks, Adam. Okay, lastly, we are going to be using sticky notes for a lot of these exercises for y'all to add your input into the board. They can be found in various ways. So there's a toolbar at the right that everyone should have access to, and you can pull them like this. Also, what we've done is we've stacked a number of notes in our exercises themselves that you can just pull from directly. You can resize them, and then you can write in them. And that will be part of the practice that we do, which also will be great because it'll get all of your names and organizations on the board. I'm going to move to that, but please feel free if you have any questions to raise your hand or speak up. In this practice session, a number of these sticky notes are here. They're editable. If I see a number of people have already written their names and their organizations, which is great. For anyone who hasn't already done so, please feel free to just click on a sticky note, write your name, and write your organization. I'll delete mine, but essentially that's how you're able to edit them. And I'll give everyone just a minute to get oriented and write their names down, and then I'll start moving into our activity-centric frames after that.
Janelle, just a question for any comments and questions we receive that might be more general. Like I'm right now writing a comment from Mona Coming about trees and forests. It's definitely related to flooding. Should that go in that gray area, that gray in
Are
that
you talking
flooding
about
section?
are you talking about in the activity itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll explain this in a second, but do please feel free to write any of your general comments and put them on top of any of the maps or the frames. If they're general, they can go anywhere in the map. Maggie will facilitate. So what I can just go ahead and explain this maybe. So what we'll do for each of these frames, and I'll orient around flooding for just a moment, but we'll do this in succession for each of the different hazards that we're talking about today, is I will walk through a brief summary of the work that we've completed as the initial part of the study, just showing some hazard and some of our result overlays on these maps, so showing some of the data that's coming in more like broadly and methodologically here. And then we'll move into a group exercise where we are going to get more focused on, areas of concern specifically for you with respect to each hazard, and what the implications of some of what you're seeing are, and as well as anything that you've reflected on already or you're coming in with knowledge already about the climate hazards and their impacts on the infrastructure in this area. And so while I'm talking or while you're participating in the discussions that Maggie is facilitating, there are places where we'd love to get your input specifically, but if you have other input outside of that, please feel free to drop that input anywhere, like physically on the map or through the Q&A, or share your reflections verbally as well.
This is great. Gina, let's go ahead and dive in.
Great. Maggie, do you want to briefly explain some of this in Spanish if Juana is still on the call before I dive in?
I can just do a really quick overview. Lo que vamos a hacer ahora es revisar con Gino cada uno de los tres tipos de riesgo, las inundaciones, los incendios y también el calor extremo. Ella va a comenzar explicando los resultados del análisis que se ha hecho hasta ahora, y son los mapas que ven ahora debajo de cada uno de esos paneles de inundaciones y incendios y calor extremo. Y luego que ella presenta, vamos a hablar en conjunto acerca del mapa, de los mapas, y ver qué comentarios tengan acerca de cómo eso puede afectar a la comunidad y qué significa para los grupos que están trabajando. Ya, Gino. Si hay preguntas en español hasta ahora. Susi, Juana, ¿todo bien?
Sí, todo bien, estoy un poquito entendiendo, ¿verdad?, de lo que están hablando y estoy conectando y no sé si más adelante va a haber como un tipo de encuesta que puedan mandarnos y así nosotros poder analizarlo y dar nuestras propias opiniones, ¿verdad?, respecto a cada uno de los puntos que están hablando.
De hecho, sí, hay una encuesta ahora que tenemos en español y al final de la presentación vamos a compartir el link para la encuesta.
Muchísimas
Gracias por
gracias.
mencionarlo. Okay, we'll share that survey. She asked about a survey link and we'll share that at the end of the presentation.
Okay, Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Juana. Um, yeah, I'm gonna start diving in into the exercise specifically. So again, first part, I'll talk briefly about some of the work that we've done and the hazard information that we've looked at, and then I'll hand over to Maggie to get into the discussion. And so the first thing that I want to talk about, and this is going to be true for every hazard that we talk about, is really the hazard information that we use as the basis of our risk assessment. And so for flooding, we looked at the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency's National Flood Hazard Layer, to look at zones where extreme flooding events might occur. Um, the what the map is showing is sort of a simplified version of what they show on their website, which is these zones in Fresno County where you see these high intensity, low likelihood flood events. And so I had marked a couple of these here, which are some purple zones and some blue zones. So purple zones show events that have quite a low chance of occurring in a particular year, like a 0.2% chance, and then the blue zones show events that have, a 1% chance of occurring in a given year. And so they both can happen in a particular year, just one is less likely than the other. And so what I just wanted to highlight before I get into the results, because you'll start to see this pop up, they're very reflective of the baseline hazard that we use, is that there's a lot of the city, because of a number of creeks and channels and rivers running into the city and alongside the city. There's a lot of the city that is prone to extreme flooding. And that's the sort of purple zone here. And then there's a lot of western Fresno where you can see just large swaths of it, from the San Joaquin River and other rivers and channels kind of showing up, as prone to flooding as well. And you can see in the maps that I'm going to show in a little bit that there's a close following of these trends in the risk itself. And so what I'm going to go through this a bit fast so we can get into the real meat of the exercises, which is the discussion. But if you have any clarifying questions, feel free to post in the Q&A or raise your hand, and one of us will be able to answer. I want to get to what that means in terms of impacts on operations. And so what we're looking at, we're marrying that hazard information like the map of the FEMA National Flood Hazard Layer with our understanding of how this particular hazard can impact roadways and bridges and bike and transit networks. And so generally flooding can impact them from all the way from just creating unsafe driving conditions, a few inches of flooding on the roadway, to like significant flooding and roads being closed for clearance and repairs. There are a number of roads that do go over rivers or are going over waterways, and sometimes that can make the bridges, sometimes that can make them prone to wash out, if there are other additional hazards like landslide in conjunction with high velocity and like high speed flooding. And I wanted to say that, so in this study, there is a lot that we looked at. We looked at what's happening, today and what might happen in the future. There's a number of potential future scenarios that we're looking at, and the map that I have here is looking at what may happen in the middle of the century, so 20 to 30 years from now. We look at, it's mostly following what's happening in the present day. So it doesn't look that different from the present day maps, but there are some impacts of climate on flooding, like higher rain, that can increase the intensity of the colors that you see on the map. And so just orienting a little bit, we look at the colors going in a rainbow spectrum all the way from this road isn't in a flood zone that's mapped, all the way to this event is happening super frequently and is having high impact. And you can see flooding sits, in the middle of the spectrum. So there's certainly some impact that these roads can see from flooding in Fresno County. And you'll see as I talk through wildfire and extreme heat that we're using the same scale and we're looking at the same time frame, and you'll see how they change on the scale themselves. So some of them you're going to see like a lot of them have that extremely high risk, and others are lower on the spectrum. So flooding is much more couched in the middle. I wanted to talk a little bit through about the impacts to the bike and transit networks, which are subsets of the road network. This map, just very briefly, is the same map above, but just zoomed in on the Fresno Clovis metro area. I'll go down here and just show that these are all the mapped bike paths as well as bike facilities on the road network. So you can like some of them mirror the roads exactly, and others are more bike paths that are going up along like linear parks. And you can see a very similar pattern following some of the hazard information that I showed earlier, that the areas where you see FEMA, like kind of that blue and that purple that I had shown, those are the ones that are coming up with a certain risk rating. And sometimes in the future, what happens is those areas that you're already seeing flooding start to flood more frequently. And so that is what can bump up the rating from, like, say it used to be a low medium, it could go up to a medium. And lastly, I wanted to show the transit network. Transit network is a bit more widespread than the bike network. We included all the transit routes from Clovis, FACS, and FCRTA. In a similar vein, you can have flood impacts on the transit network. And one thing I wanted to note is that, like a transit route is there's a number of roads that can be encompassed in a route. So we look at, we do our assessment on a road specific basis, but you can see, okay, like this route has maybe 5 roads as a part of it. They're all rated medium. This route maybe has 2 roads as a part of it. One's rated high, one's rated low. And you can kind of see once you get into the results on a more granular scale, and we'll share out more with you after this meeting, but you can see exactly, where in the transit network you're seeing these types of risks of disruption. And at the very end of it, I just wanted to, before we get into the facilitated discussion, go over some general key takeaways from the overall picture, so that you can have that in your mind as we go into the discussion, which is that in general we do see, and let me see if I can zoom in on these 2 maps because I think they do a really good job of showing that there's a lot of concentration of like predicted flooding in western Fresno County as well as the city, and it does impact roads on like a widespread regional level, but there are specific areas where you can see that pop up more. In the future, we are predicting, and this is true across California, and it's true as well in Fresno County, that flooding may increase. It's already a problem today, but there could be an increase in the amount of events that cause flooding in a particular year. And so we are noting that as well in this study. And lastly, when you think about, mitigating or like changing the way that flooding impacts for the better, that can be done, it can be done regionally, like it could be big projects, it can be done on a smaller scale as well. And so that's some of the things that we want to talk about with you and get your thoughts on as we move into the interactive portion of this exercise and this presentation. And so, Maggie, I'll hand it over to you to facilitate this side of the board. And if people can follow me, if you're following me, that's great. And if not, move over to the group exercise section. We're going to talk through 2 discussion questions.
Okay. Thank you, Gino, for the very thorough overview. We really appreciate hearing about what's anticipated and where the flooding may occur and what its impact would be to different types of transit assets or transportation assets. And I already see people following the first prompt in the board, which is to grab one of those sticky notes at the top of the board and pull it over. You can pull it onto the map directly, or you can pull it into the gray box where it says areas of concern. You can pull one of those down and you can write in it and talk about, you can write into that or tell us out loud if you're not in the board. Tell us out loud what are some of the concerns you have in terms of where flooding might be a problem. And then in question number two, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that would mean for different populations and different people that you work with. But in particular, we're looking now to talk about what areas concern you and why. And we'd love to hear thoughts. We can start talking now as people are dropping in stickies. So feel free to raise your hand or and we'll call on you and you can talk directly. I see a point here, a question just wanting to be included in future emails. Thank you. Sheila will include you in the next round of emails. Okay, Paul, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just in general, when I think about flooding and the lack of drainage, even in the metro area, definitely has impact on our transportation infrastructure, and how we move. So I don't know how to encapsulate that, but I know at least in the metro area, we're supposed to have a good drainage system, but I could imagine, not only in the Fresno Clovis area, but in the more rural areas that may not have the appropriate or infrastructure for drainage, that could really be a problem.
Right. So your concern is about right sizing drainage infrastructure
Yeah.
to account for some of this anticipated increase in flooding, both in Fresno Clovis as well as in some of the rural areas.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to take a moment to say what I realized that I didn't translate into to Spanish this point, but ahora lo que estamos haciendo en El Miro, estamos agarrando un post-it, una de estas cuadras de amarillo y escribiendo lo que nos preocupa acerca de las inundaciones, especialmente con respecto a transportación y cuáles lugares específicamente son problemáticos o son asuntos para el futuro. Y también pueden decirlo en voz alta. Um, Anybody else want to talk about what they've written on one of their stickies? I'm just noting, I'm just going to call out a few of the things that we're seeing here before we move on.
And
But
Maggie, I see
yeah.
Carson's hand up as well.
Oh, sure. Thanks. I missed that. Carson, go for it.
Awesome. Yeah, so I put two of them. The West Fresno County, with the why of low income, language barriers, folks new to the United States. Those are target populations that we work with Listos California. Those are populations that are most impacted by disasters because they're not going to know, all the resources, or they're not going to have everything translated, particularly when you get away from, English and Spanish, the very two dominant languages, those, more smaller languages where there's not always going to be a translator available. You can get into some situations where people, you can't communicate to them in disasters. So that was one. And then for the other one, I put mountain communities, the why of the older populations. We did a sit down with a aging in place agency, or aging in place group. I'm sorry. They were informal, for Tulare County. And they really spoke about, our mountain communities really hold older populations, older seniors who live alone. And, with our Listos training that we've got, we've seen it doesn't take a lot for someone whose car, may be able to, get out by themselves, can very quickly not. In the event of a power outage, where their garage door won't open now, and now they can't get their car out. Or I believe it was last or 2 years ago, the winter storms where some major roads got washed out, and then we had to airlift people out, particularly people on dialysis, which they have about 3 days um, to get care, and then also flying in resources by helicopter when major
Wow.
roads were wiped out. So just some from an emergency, planning standpoint, some things that we've seen.
Wow, that's incredible. And, those stories I think are so important to capture. And, we can have all this data, but to be able to tell those anecdotes about some, especially events that have happened in the past and then anticipating more of that in the future, how do we plan ahead for those kinds of situations? Thanks so much for sharing that. Um, Anybody else want to share what they've written?
Logan.
This is not what I've written, but I just wanted to appreciate Carson for lifting that up. I live in that community, and so we were stuck for 8 days during that flooding. So it's definitely a factor, and all of everything that you mentioned in particular around elderly residents. So thank you for lifting that up.
Felipe, are you here? Are you still here? I see you sent I think a voice file. I could not open it, so I was wondering if you can actually
Do you hear
speak it
me?
up here. Yeah, we
Yeah.
can hear you.
Hey, I'm agree with the person that has said West Side communities, the rural West Side from Fresno County. I'm from Fresno County rural communities. And one of the things that I very worry is our people or farm workers, because when this kind of problems happen, they don't get unemployment insurance. They don't get any kind of help, and they cannot go to the work because the flooding or any kind of hazard that is in the road or close from their you know the uh, the place where they work. It's something that always has worried me, that how we can help these people, that is they are the most impacted. And
Yeah.
like the person and the last person before, they don't have any kind of help because they're not legally, they don't speak the language, and they don't know how to follow all these kind of rules. Or when they hear something, they are the last one to listen. They listen all these kind of things. That's something that is worrying me since last year, 2 years ago, because I'm working with in the past with West Side Family. Now I'm working with Sin. But in the past, we used to give this kind of the food distributions, or I called some friends and told, hey, we need to help these people. I don't know how to. Let's take, any kind of donation or something and take it directly to them, because they cannot go outside. One, they're afraid of everything. They don't know the language, and they don't have anything. Like I said, they don't get anything from the government.
Thank you, Felipe. Yeah, Karen, did you want to respond to this one around emergency response and preparedness and how we're incorporating that?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that that's definitely something in terms of the equity component that we will be considering, how, talking about these equity priority communities and how language factors into that, and the ability to access services and support. So yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective.
Yeah, and I would just add that, at the end of this activity, we want to start talking about solutions. And obviously, the emergency planning and response and coordinating that in conjunction with, kind of this better understanding of where the exposure, the climate exposure is, but these social vulnerabilities are, can help prepare that workforce, to be better prepared. And then I think, in terms of farm workers, how do we increase access to information? And, certainly language is very important. Even today, we are seeing how important that is. And so how can we reach those populations that might not otherwise have this information about risk and in the case where there's really time is so short and it's really critical to act fast, having those kinds of responses ready to go. Okay, I see. So we're going to move on to the next hazard just because we're short on time, but is there any last things that people want to mention that hasn't been mentioned so far?
We have a few people still in the attendees. I was wondering if Paul is moving them to the panelists. I'm
Yeah,
not sure
but
if they are stuck
I've
there.
I've
What's going
asked,
on?
yeah, I've asked them to move, but they've declined
Got it. Okay.
their
Okay. Susie, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. As a CSW and focus on the rural areas, it is important not only thinking about the language barriers, but some farm workers, they don't not only speak, but they don't read and they don't write. So there is another issue when it's regarding about federal or other organizations, they come to try to help because they only pass the flyers or handouts to help them. But if they don't able to write and read, will be another conflict to them. So
Great point.
this is another worry because there's some like Corrades and someone I don't know in Kerman, but Corrades and Ridley, there are some person who speak dialect and they don't speak Spanish too.
Right. I think that's so important. And so it's the language barrier. It's also, literacy rates and whether maybe other types of media like radio or, even how you get the word to carry through different groups through community, through groups like yours might be really important. So thanks for flagging that. I think that's a really important point for some of those hard to reach populations. Okay, we're going to, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next hazard. I'll pass it back to Gino to talk to us about wildfire risk.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Maggie, and thank you everyone for your input on the board. I tried to mouse over almost all of them to get visibility for those people who don't have access to the Miro and can't look on their own. But if there's any portion of it going forward that we didn't get to, please feel free to speak up so we can give that the appropriate time and attention your comments need. I'm gonna be a bit more brief here, just because it follows the same pattern as flooding. So I want to talk a little bit about the data that we use to look at where wildfire is most prevalent in Fresno County, and then I want to talk through what we're seeing in terms of risk when we marry that with the impacts that it can have on the roadways and the infrastructure around Fresno. And so there's one thing I just want to quickly go over. There's many ways to look at wildfire. What we looked at in this study was this concept of like fire threat. And so that looks at the chance that the climate can cause a fire to burn in a particular area, as well as the land itself and how much that it is at risk of burning. We are focusing on physical risks, so any downtime impacts to roadways and transit operations. I am hearing all the comments around wildfire smoke, and so while wildfire threat itself doesn't encompass all areas that might be impacted by wildfire smoke, that is certainly a concern, and please share your input on those in the exercises if there are regions that aren't highlighted in particular for wildfire threat, but they are of existing concern to you for other reasons related to wildfire. When I look at the impacts itself, like so the risk results, one thing I wanted to point out are the spatial patterns here, especially now that you've seen the flooding results. So flooding obviously much more present in the city and in the valley, whereas wildfire is much more prominent in the mountains and the more rural areas that have more wildfire fuel to burn. This snapshot essentially shows, those that red hazard layer that you saw, married with some of this information about how wildfire can impact roads and what it can do to like roadside facilities. And so that's why, again, you're seeing, these ratings come up for risk around wildfire in the mountains as well as wildfire in some of these areas where there is more land, and it's not as densified and urban. Lastly, just quickly wanted to touch on the portions of the road network that also encompass the bike network and the transit network. Unlike flooding, because wildfire is so impactful in these more rural sections, you really see certain specific bike paths and transit routes. Let me scroll down here, that are of high risk to wildfire. I think one in particular, like the Aubrey transit line, I think was like the highest risk transit line across all hazards for wildfire. And you can see why it's going straight through the mountainous areas where there is a lot of forests, and a lot of potential for wildfire to impact those smaller roads. And I think that maybe is all I'm going to speak about, and we'll just move straight into the activity, unless there's any additional information, Maggie, that you maybe want to share, in Spanish before we get into it.
Rápidamente en español, estamos viendo que las partes rurales, como pueden imaginar, en las montañas son más expuestos a los incendios ahora, también en el futuro, y las calles que ven en amarillo y naranja ahí son los que están más a riesgo. También afecta la red de bicicletas y también la red de tránsito, como los buses rurales, específicamente en la parte noreste y un poco también en el sur oeste del condado, ahora donde está señalando Gino. Entonces, ahora we're going to go back to the same questions that we had before. Are there specific areas that you're very concerned about with regard to wildfires? Si hay lugares o ubicaciones que se preocupan, donde hay preocupación acerca de los incendios, puede notarlo en the post-it, en el mirror board, o quisiéramos escuchar de ustedes también. So go ahead and add your stickies, and please raise your hand if you want to talk about anything different here.
Yeah, and I see April, you've got
April's hand is up.
Hi. Yeah, I think it's another one of those west of 99 concerns is that while it's not currently necessarily a high fire risk, but with all of the ag land and farmland that we have, we've seen a much higher influx of smaller brush fires that have the potential to get out of control, that could hit a neighborhood, those things. And there are very few ingress and egress points out of our communities. So we've even talked about this as a family from my days of working at the Red Crosses. How would we get out of our area? I live in a neighborhood, but all around me is ag land. We're constantly watching for fire hazards, going, how would we get out of our neighborhood? And how would we tell our neighbors? And so it comes back again, do we have is there some way that we could do like an emergency phone line, almost like what they had in Maui, right? That would be able to be translated by the over 40 languages and dialects that we know are in our West Central area. So as it doesn't show as a major concern necessarily today, I think it is something that has not even really been dealt with at all, that needs to have some serious attention to it for the entire west area. Like, we've thought, do we go clear to the 5? Do we just start heading south? We would not probably be able to get to the 99. So that happens to be for all of our Fresno West neighbors clear to the 5.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying. Yeah, specifically that geography that you're concerned about, and how the agricultural lands and the road network combined with the hazard create kind of this question around evacuation and what that looks like. And then also your idea of like a phone tree or some sort of, connection for evacuation sounds really interesting. And that could be organized at the community level. So thanks for those great comments. Anybody else want to contribute? Please let me know if I'm missing hands, team.
Yep, Ray has their hand up.
Okay, thanks, Ray.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got in little late, but just want to announce that I'm participating here.
Thank
The
you.
mayor city of Huron. So let me I guess catch up on the discussion here, and I'll be able to hopefully share some more comments. Thanks.
Hi,
Sure,
Ray,
thanks.
welcome.
Okay, I'm just going to read off of one of those other post-its that I see here, which is the urban interface. The wildland urban interface is a growing risk area, and so wildfire preparedness will be really important, especially in that what they call the WUI area between the two, the urban and the wildland. And then Tony, you have a great comment here. Would you like to talk about it? I can go ahead and read out Tony's comment. He's noting that smoke inhalation is a really important consequence or impact of wildfires that impacts outdoor workers. So especially farm workers, but also bike commuters in the area. So that's such a good point. It's not always just limited to the wildfire itself, but the smoke impacts as well.
Thank you for reading my comment.
I wasn't sure if you couldn't come off mute or something, Tony. Do you want to say anything else about that?
No, just speaking as a physician, thinking about the health impacts of all that, it affects everybody that is breathing, even indoors, especially vulnerable populations. They may not have very airtight. Housing and that sort of thing, that it kind of gets in, and it's especially wildfire smoke has been associated with all kinds of health risks. So very concerned about that. So.
Yeah, and that kind of gets us into question two, which is what do these disruptions mean? So, we were very focused on the transportation network and how the wildfire risk intersected with that those assets. But what does this mean for the health and safety? And you really nailed it there with your comment that the air quality impacts are especially important for populations with either low income or housing that isn't up to snuff or adequate for dealing with those kinds of air quality issues.
So yeah, that speaks to the resilience of what can we do to make our housing. Do we get? I know there's been some discussion about getting air purifiers for people that have problems with it affecting indoor air quality and that sort of thing.
Right, Ray, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to share a fact that Huron has the highest adult asthma rate in the county of Fresno. It's the FYI.
Wow.
On the website. And that's without all these fires, right? So when we're talking about vulnerable, it's not just about low income, but it's also those that are compromised already, right?
Yeah, exactly. So those with asthma, heart conditions, yeah, any pre-existing condition that could be threatened by these air quality impacts? How during wildfire are we considering their evacuation and their safety, emphasizing that?
Angela has her hand up. Angela?
Angela, are you able to come off mute?
Yeah, sorry about that. This is Angela Islas. I'm with Central California Environmental Justice Network. I'm also extremely tired, so I'm doing my best to catch up. I just hopped onto this meeting pretty late, but I think around this board discussion on wildfire prevention, I just kind of wanted to circle back to emergency response and preparedness. I kind of had this thought where how do we, I think the idea here is that with rural communities here in the Fresno County area, especially on the west side, broadband is a very, very big issue. Like broadband access is an issue. It is still something that not a lot of residents have easy access, especially for Wi-Fi access as well. So I think that for an idea to maybe kind of think a little bit more about how do we improve a network where maybe transit can be incorporated in emergency response. Because I know that like the west side is prevalent for wildfires, and then we do have the east side that is prevalent on that as well. I think linking how transit could be a form of emergency, response when there are folks that need to have a certain transportation to evacuate. So piecing that together with just kind of like a dedicated phone line for then a transit can go and be able to evacuate folks. I'm trying to make sure that there's, I guess, like a line of networking that could kind of make it a little easier for how we respond quickly in the events of wildfires. And I can circle that back as well with flooding. I mean, flooding is sort of a very tricky situation, but yeah, just thought I'd kind of throw my fogged perspective
Well, that
into
was
this discussion.
that was pretty brilliant for having a fogged mind. I think you're nailing it. It's a question of connecting the dots between the emergency response, these transit networks that are affected themselves, and yeah, and kind of planning in advance for that. And so I think right now we kind of, or traditionally, I would say we kind of manage a lot of risks in silos. And so I think just continuously figuring out ways to connect the dots more is really important. So let's move on to the next hazard, which is extreme heat. And we are running a little short on time. So Gino, if you just can give us the punchline, that would be really helpful. And then we're going to move afterwards to the end of the board, and we'll just talk about all three hazards together.
Perfect. Yeah, there's just a few frames that I wanted to talk about with respect to extreme heat. So we looked at extreme heat, so very hot days or very hot days for a long period of time. There are many, many ways where it can impact infrastructure or users of infrastructure, but we looked particularly at the impacts on, again, like operations to roads and bridges and all the facilities that use them, like transit networks and bike networks. We also looked at heat impacts on the riders themselves, particularly transit riders. And so punchline wise, there are a couple things I just want to highlight. The one thing is in comparison to these extreme flood events or extreme wildfire events, high heat days are very common, already common, and they're also very widespread. So in this map, it's showing when heat index is quite high, and you can see it across the county. It's quite high particularly in the areas that are more settled. Obviously, in the mountains, there's less days of higher heat. And you can see it, you can look at it in different ways too. One of the maps that we had put in this mirror board, and I'll just explain it very briefly, is we're looking at, the number of extended heat days, and that impact on roadway pavement condition, and roads themselves. And while there are some areas that do get hotter, overall, the county does tend to see just high temperatures across the board, and can see high temperatures for long periods of time. From a impacts on transit rider perspective, we have two maps, and I'll just show them very quickly. Is that the first piece of this is these events, because they're quite frequent, when we look at risk, which marries, the frequency of and the likelihood of when an extreme hazard occurs with its impacts, we see that actually this happens quite a bit. And so hence it's hitting the top of our scale. That's why you see all this black, in the sense that, extreme heat events can have these impacts, and they have them a lot. And then lastly, transit, the impacts of heat on transit riders, and the transit network itself can be felt across the board, but especially when buses are air conditioned, the real place of impact is when, you're walking to or waiting at bus stops, that sort of first last mile of the journey. And so kind of mapped out all the bus stops and showed them on a map of the heat index overlaid. And you can see that, yeah, just generally across the board, this is an issue. And so like any type of, changes or work or projects that we think about would obviously be a lot more widespread and a lot more systemic compared to flood or compared to wildfire, where you can identify specific locations where, flooding might be particularly bad. I'm going to pause here and maybe see if there are any particular reflections or questions that we want to talk about with respect to heat. And if not, I'll move over to this last board, which is more of a solutions gathering wrap-up section of the Miro.
Rápidamente quisiera decir que en español que estamos viendo que hay impacto de calor extremo en todo el condado. Específicamente estamos destacando que los paraderos de buses son son impactados mientras las personas están esperando o mientras están caminando para esperar el bus. Pueden ser afectados por el calor, puede llegar la temperatura a más de 100 grados Fahrenheit, más de hasta 108, que puede tener impactos in la salud, obviamente. So you can add your stickies to this area, as we're gonna, same thing, any area that you want to note that you're concerned about, or any specific populations that you're concerned about, you can note that there. And then let's go over to the last part of the board in the interest of time.
We do have a couple hand raised from Angela and Natalie.
Sure. Angela?
This is, I guess I'm just observing this in the sense of looking at a climate resilient design for roads. And I think that it'd be great to just kind of see maybe some examples, if there's any, like outside of the state, on road designs in the aspect of climate resiliency. I know asphalt is, just, I know it's a very common mixture that has been used for decades for our roads, and with our extreme heat and just kind of how much of that really contributes to increasing extreme heat. It'd be great to observe uh, maybe a different way on how we could shift from that type of mixture, and redesigning roads that can actually be able to support with lessening that extreme heat impact.
Yeah, I see
think
a
that
lot
was
of
just
people.
yeah.
Well, thank you. I see a lot of people mentioning trees and, different ways of kind of planning green corridors, or other types of, shade and street design. So thank you so much for noting that. And that's definitely in the solution area that we could identify. And there was one other hand up that I was missing. Emma, do you mean to have your hand up? Oh, that's Natalie. Natalie, sorry.
It was Natalie.
Mhm.
Natalie, you're muted if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Okay, Natalie, if you oh, she says, can you unmute mute me? Is that something you can do, Paul?
Yeah, she's able to unmute herself, but I've asked her to unmute as well. Let me
Okay.
also
If
try.
not, Natalie, feel free to write in the chat, and
Okay, I think
we'll
she's
move on.
unmuted. I think she's unmuted
Oh,
now.
there you go. Great.
Got it. Sorry, I didn't notice the microphone on the left because usually in webinars it's not there. But yeah, I just wanted to echo what Angela just shared regarding like looking into different materials for roads. I know that some some counties and cities, I think they use like cooling pavement, and because it does reduce like the heat island effect. And I think another thing I did want to share is like I've heard like from residents before that sometimes it's so hot, like they wait in their car with the AC on, but I think having more transit options available that are like bus stops that are equipped with, air conditioning, I think would be helpful, and it will reduce like folks using their cars, but also, give folks a place to stay, meanwhile they're waiting for their kids to come out of school. So just some things to consider.
Great ideas. Yeah, let's get those down somewhere. We're taking notes, by the way, on the side. So if it's not on the board, we'll still have a record of this. But yeah, every street design includes a lot of things. It includes materials, but it also includes those considerations like, where are people waiting? Where are people standing and needing some sort of protection? So thank you for noting that. I am going to move us just to the last part of the board. So that we can wrap up and you can hear some next steps as well. And so this part of the board, we've already started naming some of the great solutions, but we're asking you to kind of brainstorm and think about, the challenges that we've reviewed and what are the solutions that you would provide or prioritize if you could. And so please go ahead and feel free to grab a sticky on this wrap up section and put your ideas about solutions. And we've heard things, like you've been saying, these phone trees, focusing on emergency response and evacuation. We've heard things like think about road materials and shade. So any other ideas like that would be really great. Okay. And does anybody want to share anything that they're dropping in here into this last section? This one is interesting. I don't know who wrote it about the rural road closure dynamic and communication.
We do have a hand. Oh, yeah, Carson, go ahead.
I wrote that. Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit more on that. I know I mentioned about, disasters and everything like that, but from an example from when we were working in Alpaw, when it flooded, as the Tulare Lake rose around the town, more and more rural roads were closed. And it wasn't so much that it was, an emergency. It was the day to day, how am I going to get to work today? What roads are open today? And we actually went to a town hall where residents yelled at county leaders because what could have been a 20-minute drive is now a 60-minute drive trying to figure out what roads are open today, and just a lack of communication there. And then also they built that really high, they finally went in and raised a road, right? Went in with a bunch of gravel. I think it was like 15 feet high or something like that, because they were worried about Alpaw being flooded out. but you can only drive 20 miles per hour on it because it was just gravel. So frustrations there of, now it's a 75-minute commute for me, and I'm only making $15 an hour, so how the intersects with quality of life for longer periods of time was really on display there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just getting to work as a kind of priority. We think a lot about like criticality, but criticality in terms of access to work is so important. Um, there's something here around nature-based solutions. I just want to give that a moment, and then we can transition back to the PowerPoint, and you can feel free to continue to write your ideas in here as we transition out. Okay. I don't see any hands or anybody really eager to say any last things. So thank you so much for your input on this, and we'll talk you through what's going on next. There will be some more opportunities to engage, and we will share our screens in PowerPoint now, so we can close down our Miro board and tell you what's coming up. So Gino, if you'll shut down your screen, and I will share my screen. Okay, and pass it over to Sheila.
Thank you, Maggie.
Oops.
You
Sorry about that.
wanna share the PowerPoint, or you're not sharing the PowerPoint? Should I wait?
Just my messy desktop. Hold on one second.
No worries.
While we are waiting to transition, I just want to say thank you. We just have a few minutes more left, and we really appreciate your time today. We had thought a lot about convening in person, and I wanted to be very thoughtful around everyone's time and travel needs for this, and so really tried to get all of your good ideas in this dynamic format. And thank you for rolling with us on all of this. So Sheila, I'll pass it to you.
Sure. So, everybody, thank you so much. We honestly we couldn't ask for better group today, and thank you for being patient and with like the issue we had with translation. So, and thank you so much, Maggie, for handling everything so good. We wanted to make sure we go over what is next step for the outreach. We have the survey is still open. I send the link through my email invite through the email invite. I will resend that. So please take the survey if you haven't done it. And that's a very good way to let us know of more comments and feedback that you have, especially after today's exercise. Also, there's going to be 5 pop-ups or focus meetings coming next year after our technical team use the comments that we got today, and with other risk assessment and technical assessment, there's going to be 5 prioritized areas that we want to come to the community in those 5 areas and do a pop-up or focus meeting. We definitely want to reach back to you and ask for your consultation of where to go, who to meet. We already got really great comments. For example, Kelly, offered helping us in mountain area. We know where to go for the west side. Everybody were very vocal. So you're going to hear back from us on that. And also, in addition, in March, when the draft plan is ready, you have another opportunity to come to a meeting and review that draft plan and give us your comments again. So we have a few questions. We were going to do a poll today, but maybe for the sake of time, I will email those to you. Just 2 questions, and I will also email the survey links. But just these 2 questions about where to go, what is the best area for the pop-up, and that we can do the tabling and who we connect more. So I'll email these two questions. Please take a few minutes and answer these questions, emailing me back, and we appreciate all your helps here. Back to you, Brooke, I guess.
Yeah. Well, with 3 minutes to spare, I just want to say thank you to everybody again. We will be following up with these materials to share with you over email. And Paul, I just want to see if you have any other closing comments from the COG as well. And Angela, I do see a hand up. So
Yeah, why
let's
don't
get,
we answer Angela's questions? And I also
yeah.
saw Tony
Oh,
also, I think
great.
had a hand up. So,
Perfect.
Angela, you have any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah. Hi, Sheila. It's been a while.
Hi,
Um,
Angela.
so yeah, no, I just kind of so I'm jumping in a little bit late on this project, and I'm just trying to make sure that I understand the timeline. If you could go back to that slide. I'm trying to understand how you're envisioning right now the pop-ups and the feedback to be incorporated into the draft plan, because I think for me, Fresno County is like a very massive, it's a very massive county. And so, we have the west side, we got the east side, and I know that Sheila, I have some really great ideas on how to help you out with the tabling part of that. But I'm just trying to understand, like, based on these five particular pop-ups, and then how a lot of the comments will be incorporated in the draft plan. I think what are you wanting to, I guess, get from that feedback related to the draft plan? So I'm just trying to understand, like, what is the feedback that you need ultimately with these pop-ups, because it's a very small amount of pop-ups.
I will let Maggie elaborate on the questions or the feedback regarding to these to the plan. But we definitely I agree with you. It's a huge county. So when we were thinking about doing, like, let's say a public workshop or go focus or pop-ups, it really didn't make sense to have a public workshop, like maybe one or two in one place that people cannot travel there. For example, there was no feasible way to do workshops in all different corners of Fresno County because of the size of the county. So this is how we want to evaluate, be flexible. Is it like really a pop-up? Like, by the way, the picture you guys are all looking at it. Angela is in this picture. These are the series of pop-ups we did together for another project. And it is a very helpful way to go to people and find them where they are and ask them those critical questions. But Maggie, can you elaborate more on, like, what are the specific information we're going to look for at that stage?
Sure. I mean, what we're trying to do for COG is to identify a pipeline of projects, like what are the types of resiliency projects that would be helpful to address these risks. And so the kinds of things that we were just naming are examples of the types of projects that we might recommend. And so right now we're in the process of identifying, where are these key areas of risk, and intersecting that with, other considerations like, where are the equity priority communities and what are the potential impacts to communities, and why would we prioritize certain projects. So these five pop-ups are not necessarily where the most important locations are, but they should be representative of a variety of types of projects, and start to get to help us with our ground truthing of our understanding of what the risk looks like on the ground, what people are actually dealing with, so that we can better recommend a pipeline of projects that would go forward in the plan.
Yeah, thank you, Maggie, for that. And from Fresno Cog's perspective, the draft plan really opens up in March, but it's going to be a several month long process of developing that plan and getting public comments. And as Sheila and Maggie kind of outlined, our goal is to really get out into the community and share our ideas and some of the analysis that we walked through today, and really get that ground truth feedback from the community in where they live, and for some of our team to actually see some of that impact that is occurring. The pop-ups occurring in February, there could be actual flooding occurring. We've had several years actually of rain events impacting in the early parts of a calendar year. So being able to go out into the communities, have those conversations, and really talk about potential projects and getting that incorporated into the plan is really the idea with those 5 pop-ups. Um, so yeah, I just want to thank everybody for the participation. Really great comments from tons of folks here. I know we're going a few minutes over, so we've lost a couple folks, but I saw the attendance got up to almost 40 people at one point. So I just want to thank everybody for participating today and all your comments. And we have those mural boards that we've got a lot of great comments on. We'll be incorporating all of this feedback into the next stage of the project. And so just want to thank you again for participating today. And Sheila will be reaching back out with these 2 questions. If you're able to help us with any upcoming events that we could hold these pop-ups at, and if there's any other organizations you feel uh, that should be a part of the conversation on the climate resiliency plan, we'd love to hear from those organizations. So just want to thank everybody again for your participation here today.
And Paul will be coordinating with Familias en Acción about the
Oh, great.
Spanish speaking.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maggie, for
Yeah.
helping out with that and to set up that secondary meeting so that we can get their feedback. That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.